All right, we are officially live, but we don't have viewers yet, so I'll just hang tight for them to get in. I'll send one more tweet. All right, good morning, everyone, and happy end of March. If you're here, you are here for the latest interventions and preventions here at Pivot Learning Partners, where we're presenting multi-tiered systems of support. So I'm Cyrus Namadi, I'm our marketing manager. Thank you all for joining me, and I'm joined by Carla Hulse, our Chief Education Programs Officer. Good morning, Carla.
Good morning, Cyrus.
All right, so let's jump right into it. We've got some good stuff to go over today, so I am just going to get our PowerPoint started and we will follow along. So just give me one moment. All right. So once again, good morning and welcome to the latest interventions and preventions multi-tiered systems of support. So what are multi-tiered systems of support? Well, what's the reason for it? Too many students are falling through the cracks because of a lack of timely SEL and academic interventions. The two should be connected into a tiered system of support that prevents students from school failure and places a student on a path of success. So in this webinar today, you will learn about the latest advances in systemic interventions aligned with robust data utilization and professional learning. So we're going to do things a little differently today. So again, joined by Carla Hulse. She's a former senior program associate with the American Institutes for Research. For more than 20 years, she's consulted with schools, districts, and states to implement successful turnaround and transformation services. In addition to her direct work with districts and schools, Carla is also a skilled education researcher and recently completed work to assess the implementation of teacher and leader evaluation systems in multiple districts funded by the U.S. Department of Education and the California Department of Education. So who are we? Pivot Learning Partners was founded in 1995. We're a nonprofit organization of K-12 education experts working shoulder to shoulder with schools, districts, and charters to address their biggest challenges. We partner directly with more than 90 school districts, touching over half the counties in California and impacting the practice of thousands of educators, ultimately reaching more than 1 million students. Our partners primarily serve heavy concentrations of high-need students, of whom 58% live in poverty, 79% of children of color, and 50% are non-native English speakers. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to pass it over to Carla.
Thank you, Cyrus, and good morning and welcome, everyone. And so, Cyrus, on my screen, I didn't see the subsequent slides. I just see the first slide, so I want to make sure that everyone is it could just be my screen. So I just want to kind of give you a heads up there. But again, welcome. Seeing the slide that I need to see. So again, good morning. As Cyrus Carla Hulse, and I'm the Chief Education here at Pivot Learning Partners. And for the next or so, we're going to really be kind of recapping that I did at the California Small Schools District Association conference a couple of weeks ago. And I presented on systems of support. And the session was actually called RTI on Steroids. not a title that I chose, a title that most people are familiar with, that of RTI. So what you should see on your screen is, I think, an eloquent way or a visual way of representing what MTSS is, right? So it is a combination of RTI, which is response to intervention, plus social emotional learning, plus professional learning. So and often people's minds, their constructions for students, they think and go with RTI on one side and PBIS. But MTSS is a larger framework, and you have to do professional learning of the adults who are interacting and supporting. And all of those wonderful things, RTI, SEL, and are under-supported or undergirded by a rather robust data system or a system of data. So again, MTSS is a framework. It is not another initiative. It employs problem-solving techniques, provide academic as well as the social, emotional, or behavior instructional supports and interventions for students at intensity. And data-driven decision-making and why data systems are lying everything on my equation. And you use that data appropriately, providing resources to accelerate achievement. It also provides differentiated professional learning for teachers and families. And again, in my career, it's spanned over 20 years. That professional learning piece has been left out, and I think it's a very that still many folks kind of gets left out. So very important when you're thinking about that system. All right, great. So just a few quick definitions that I want to go through. So again, RTI, intervention, that is the practice of providing high quality, multi-tiered instruction and interventions matched to students. So when you're engaging in RTI as a teacher in a classroom, you professional learning community, whether that is a grade level or a content level, monitor academics, and when necessary, intervene with research-based interventions when students are showing signs of academic struggle. So the beauty of RTI is that you intervene early and often, not when a child has failure or far off course to kind of course correct. So that's RTI definition. SEL, so learning. Those are the supports and provided to students at varying levels of intensity on student need. Again, teachers and their professional learning communities employ classroom-based positive behavioral systems to establish and address student behaviors like breaking of school rules, meaning students coming to class tardy, cutting class, non-attendance, or displaying aggressive behaviors. I think what's also calling it SEL is because it's not just the behavior happening in the classroom, also any antisocial or unproductive behaviors that could students progress to college and career. So those would be things like alcohol, pregnancy, gang affiliation. So again, wrapping your arms around all of those antisocial behaviors that head off target. So I just wanted to jump back in and do a little definition before we the meat of building an MTSS system. And then last, again, for me, this is a refreshable data system that captures student level academic, so grades, formative interruptions, and those social emotional data markers, target class, non-attendance, evidence of drug usage, evidence of gang affiliation, and having one data system, hopefully, or a set of data systems, data, and it's refreshable sometimes every class period if you're a high school, but at least every day, so that teachers have enough data on students to make the next slide.
right.
So, as I mentioned, MTSS is not a new initiative. It is the umbrella by which your initiatives sit under. MTSS lies all of this. So if you have, Common Path, community schools, if you have, all of us pretty much do special education, they all fit under the wonderful MTSS. It is not yet another, it is how we do school. Again, it is a framework, a way to organize academic supports, all of your behavior, all of your academic interventions, all of your academic initiatives aligned to respond and support students. And again, this is enough that data call for an MTSS system to work. And when you have the plethora of data around student decisions about the whole child, just make decisions based on something like a summative assessment and make assumptions, rightly or whether or not a student is doing well, or only using probably too late to do something, and then it's much harder to kind of course correct for individual students and get them on track. So as Cyrus moves on to the next slide, this is kind of a webinar to a presentation I did at the Small Schools District Association. And at that presentation, I went through these slides that I'm sharing with you all now, all predicated on having the participants build their own MTSS during the session. So in a few slides, we'll get to a stopping point, and actually Cyrus is going to show a actual presentation. You'll get to hear some of the questions that came up from the participants around, how would you do their school setting? And the way that we helped them frame their minds really around it was I gave them a case study of a school, a student by the name of Jorge. So again, as you're listening through the presentation now, kind of think about where your school is or where you is. And if you've taken the step towards MTSS, where are you in that journey? And how today resonate with what you all are doing. So next slide, Cyrus. So this triangle with what you'll see are kind of multiple different initiatives along the continuum. This is really helping you, again, get a framing of then how would MTSS work in my school setting. So see the bottom tier, green, that we're calling universal, is really where that first tier, the high quality teaching and school supports for both positive behavior as well as the academic that all students should. If what your school and or your district provides is working, most students, and by me, 90% of students would be successful without needing additional help. So again, most people, when you see the triangles and you see the tiers, you see that kind of go along each step. And traditionally, level, you'll see 90%. Kind of confusing for most folks, because again, 100% of students should receive universal on the academic as well as the behavior side. Why you will see the percentage of 90% is the success rate. So 90% of your students do in the tier 1 universal level. It doesn't mean that only 90% of your students are receiving universal supports. It means that 90% of them are successful. So just wanted to clarify that. There, tier 2, which is yellow here, describes the additional interventions that smaller groups of smaller that is roughly 7 to 8% of your student body would need supports to be successful, right? So those supports could be anything from, and my example here, personalized learning, or having a different kind of family engagement, or African American male achievement. But again, it's a little more targeted, and students are displaying early warnings of not being successful at the universal level. The array of universal supports move children into those interventions. Now, the thing about targeted interventions, and really ultimately about MTSS, it is not a place for kids to go. It's just amplifying the supports of students are receiving. So I think in kind of all, even in my previous world as a special educator, always having that conversation with my gen ed counterparts that special ed was not a place to go. Special ed were services that students were receiving, plays out for MTSS. Be going to targeted interventions, they're just receiving those supports so that they're most successful in the school setting. If you have things like personalized learning, that can happen in the classroom. It could be smaller groups of students, online support beyond teachers providing, a push-in of additional tutors or push-in of additional pairs or staff to support the students. Again, it's not a place for kids to go. It's the intensification of supports. We move up, which is red, intensive, roughly 2% of your student population, the tier 3 supports. And again, tier 3 describes interventions that are designed for individual students who need the most extra help on specific skills. So you've tried interventions for X amount of time, your school or district determined threshold. You then move kids into the targeted receiving of targeted support. You are trying multiple things over time and progress monitoring to make sure that they are being successful, but not where kids are seemingly to be successful, either academically or socially, emotionally, or both. They're not necessarily separate. Then you move into that intensive. Again, that is highly individualized. It could be things like community schools or as a last resort, identifying a child needs. But again, that's not always the case. So I wanted to just put some examples, initiatives that most folks already have schools and or districts, and where they potentially could fall of an MTSS. Now, for some schools that I've worked with, community schools is actually something they do at the, I actually, there in California, I've worked with where personalized learning is also something that they infuse in their universal. So at every school and every district, but the main point here is that MTSS is not another new thing. It is by which all of your initiatives get rationalized and become a little more coherent. All right, next slide.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned before, so again, Cyrus, I'm not seeing the refreshable, so.
In a different way. All right, is this better?
Yep, go one more slide.
Okay.
And so the main point of my presentation was helping people try to build an MTSS support a particular school. So I gave out a case study of a young fifth grader by the name of Jorge, and he is an actual student, a rather small school in Central California. And so I walked through kind of the steps the district would need to take to help support students like Jorge and all students, right? So I want to talk about the building of the MTSS system. Really the first step, or call it, is called laying the MTSS foundation, where the school or the district supports decision-making to appropriately allocate district resources to school sites. So in order to do these kinds of things, again, the school or the district needs to first develop a district professional learning and assessment calendar, remembering to, throughout the year, be able to support the adults in how to support students across the continuum on the academic and social emotional side. So having an array of differentiated opportunities for teachers, and then build a regular of assessments. And those assessments have to be formative, and again, depending on where the district or kind of has cut points when you make decisions, whether moving up or down the continuum, you have a calendar throughout the year. So when I did this work in Illinois, one of my turnaround schools, our assessment calendar, we did in-class formative assessments every week, and then we did our benchmarks. The benchmark assessments were the standardized more assessments that were part of a EPAS system. Those decisions were important for the high school. And so when we were intervening up until trying as much as we could to support kids in ways that we thought would get them back down to the green, at that 6 weeks, decisions on, we need to move Sue, Beth, or Bob to, intensive supports on literacy or around mathematics. So their schedules could change, their could change. So those kinds of idea of professional learning as well as assessment calendars are really in building your system. Next is really, again, for the ongoing job embedded differentiated professional learning for your teachers. So yes, they're learning about RTS and Common Core, but they also have to learn about how do I utilize my data dashboard? What does active case management look like kids now inside of MTSS? If your school is using Universal Design for Learning as a Tier 1 intervention, running around that. So again, making sure that you're doing all of this legwork before you jump into the actual implementation of MTSS. Next, I think is hugely important is having that menu of research-based tier and supports that are both internal to your school or district, and some are coming from external resources. But vetting all of those interventions and then them to the particular behaviors, whether it's academic or social emotional, that children would display so that teachers know what to do. They are seeing the early warning signs of a child. So there's no guesswork. They're wonderfully crafted system of interventions and support aligned to every possible academic or behavior difficulty that children could display. And then lastly, I think really is having establishing the thresholds for identifying students in each by school type. So long a child needs to display particular warning signs before they get an intervention and a support in the middle and high school. That may look different at different school types, and the thresholds may be longer or shorter depending on the age children. So some of the few first steps that a school or district needs to take when building an MTSS system. The next step is actually developing those. Again, I think you all are very familiar with the construct, but in order to do that, we talk about this robust data system, and I cannot. So tier 1, if you're having high quality instruction, you need to make sure that every teacher is actually providing high quality instruction. So we need to provide a lot of supports for our, and then making sure that there are clear to track student progress. So that's that data dashboard, training, making sure that there's PLC time so the adults can to discuss students and make decisions on what's working or what's not working. And then again, having that embedded ongoing professional learning for the adult. Tier 1, I think pretty much people will understand. Just making sure that it's clear and so that teachers aren't trying to make things up on their own. Tier 2s and tier 3 are a little, not more challenging, but I think folks need to think through a little harder. So again, tier 2 line bound 6 to 8 weeks or whatever your thresholds are. Set of interventions and supports for either academic or social emotional issues, but they need to be vetted to behaviors and uploaded onto your district data dashboard. So again, their jobs are becoming less cumbersome. Drop down menu of what is it that I need to do when a child is displaying, is non-attending. The scenario that I presented for Jorge was missing 50 days of school days last year and was pretty on track to missing that same amount this academic school year. So in most cases, if the school had an MTSS, waited until 50 days, it would have been days. But those kinds of indicators would show up in the report. They would be trained on it, so they would know what to do when a child has missed 5 days. You don't wait too late, you can't course correct. In your tier 2, you want to make sure you've got those pre and post assessments and progress monitoring, so that we can, again, early and often decisions around students. Have the appropriate schedule necessary if a child needs to have different courses, their academic or social emotional needs. And then again, bringing together those professional learning communities to ensure that teachers are progress monitoring on their students, so that all kids are being looked at and supported when necessary. And then again, similar, still having those targeted time-bound interventions, still having those pre and post assessments and progress monitoring tools, still having the array of schedules for students so that they can move in and out of interventions if necessary at the tier 3 level. Most importantly here, I think the goal is to get kids who are either tier 3 or tier 2 to being highly successful. When I was the director of PD in Chicago Public Schools, our triangle was inverted. So we had some of our kids at tier 3, and very few kids, 2 or 3, that we thought who were universal level. And that's because we had no continuum. The kid was struggling. They automatically needed some kind of intensive support needed to happen for them. So again, a lot of work can happen at the universal level in terms of interventions before you make decisions to move kids into the targeted. So once you've built actual tiers, then you actually start to implement while you're building. So again, doing some building happens. Implemented, then you obviously want to monitor how MTSS is actually doing what we said we were going to do. Our kids being highly successful, 90% of kids being highly successful at the universal level. Those are kind of your on the success of MTSS. Do we have fewer students being suspended? Do we have fewer students coming to school? Do we have fewer students displaying aggression towards others, themselves, teachers? Do we have fewer students holding antisocial behaviors like bullying or drug abuse? So again, kind of go front end as you're building, saying what is it we're trying to reduce, and then making sure you're building an MTSS to reduce and meet those goals. Next slide, Cyrus.
There you go.
Great. So again, like Cyrus and I mentioned, this is kind of part 2 of a presentation that I did. And so we're going to now jump into a snippet of that. What you're going to see is the participants actually just getting into build assess model and asking some around the scenario that they had to read in Jorge's school. So Cyrus, without further ado, let's go to District Association presentation.
All right. One moment, and sorry, just a moment, having a little technical difficulty here, getting our YouTube up. Okay, here we are. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I hear that we've been having some trouble with the YouTube video, that it hasn't been showing. I am putting back on the slides, and hopefully we can get a little bit more clarity. I will be linking to the video so that you can see it properly. Everyone can see properly now, I hope? Carla?
I did for a second refresh.
Okay.
It went away.
All right. I'm back on the slides for now.
Okay, so now you can go to the video.
I'll go to the video manually, yeah.
Yeah.
The school is engaged in all of those
Great.
initiatives. So those may be helpful to you. You may say, hey, we need more Common Core support training for teachers, or we don't need the African American.
Oh dear.
Yeah, so American Male Initiative, because you've read the scenario. So you can throw out some things and say, the school really needs to focus on one thing, and it's this. Those are just additional pieces that were in the scenario as well. Any other clarifying questions on what it is that you're being tasked with? No? Yes? Okay. There's no wrong or wrong answer, right?
Find a way to make school a more appropriate place than home. He's had problems at home or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a possibility of doing that would be more hands-on type stuff.
Mhm.
That's like one of the reasons why he uses computers.
So let's start with his teachers. What support do they need maybe to adjust good first instruction? Are there issues there, do we think? Yes.
There's no evidence in your write-up about who has a relationship with Jorge.
Yeah.
So I think the foundation would be that Jorge has a trusted adult. And
Yeah.
especially considering his family structure and his history, you would
Yeah.
hope that he has a meaningful relationship
Yeah.
or is in some sort of mentoring program in the school and
Yeah.
has a person who recognizes whether he is there or not
Yes.
every day and checks on him. So I think that would be foundational. And then I would want more data on his basic performance levels. He's proficient in literacy in fifth grade.
Yep.
So those would be sort of my initial
Yep.
steps. And like, there wasn't anything about if there'd been an SST, like
Yep.
teachers come in and talked about him and what he's been successful in, what
Mhm.
he enjoyed, where he's done well.
Yep.
Because there's a lot to work with. This thing
Mhm.
has strengths.
Totally. Anyone else? Thanks. That's really good. Guys in the back, I heard a lot about.
We were in the
Oh, okay.
Carla, he's in the foster system, correct?
Yes, he is.
That's an interesting system at times. You know, unfortunately, I think we get caught up in sharing of data, sharing of information. The more we can find out about
Yeah,
coming through that system, I know he has a younger sibling.
he does.
Does he have more than just one? Where are the other ones?
Mhm.
You know, I know it's difficult to find out as much if you can about his parents.
Yeah.
He actually is.
Mhm.
He's dealt with as an early.
Yeah, I think the SPAC table, that was kind of their synopsis. Like, we really need to get to know Jorge because there are great strengths, as you guys said. He's a phenomenal kid. Just to give you a little more information context. So there's abuse in the foster home, and it's his sibling being abused. So, you know, unpacking that would be really helpful, right? And the one person that has seemingly gotten to know Jorge is his computer teacher. How many students are in his computer class? 10. So small class size, and this teacher gets to know every single kid on a personal level. But not just to kind of hang out, but to learn and then drive his instruction to support what kids are interested in. That's what's happening in computer class. Not so much in his English, math, science. They're really trying to wrap their arms around Common Core, God bless them, and they're trying to learn that, right? kind of at the behest of kids. They're just, as the adults, they're struggling with their own professional selves. So that's why I wanted to start with the adults. I think we forget that we have to also support adults, right? So it's both. It's both. We can't solve Jorge without helping the adults in Jorge's life. Any other comments? I know we're out of time, but does this, yes.
Well, also, we talked a little bit about social emotional learning, like what is in place to help Jorge build community, because we talked about like attendance and pregnancy and gang involvement, but we didn't talk about sort of a pro-social curriculum, a program that actually helps kids get to know each other and develop social skills for interaction, collaboration, and collaboration.
Yeah, and so most of my professional career has been at the high school level, and the ways that we've done that, some of it is around our advisory structure. So again, having creative schedules where you carve out time for adults to get to know a small group of kids. So there's someone always checking in. Where's Jorge? He's not here today. What do we need to do to make sure that Jorge's here? And there are also a set of peers who also care that Jorge is there. Right now we know he's being bullied, so we don't know if he has any friends other than his sibling. So for the high schools that I've worked with, we've built in a curriculum and a structure that supports every kid. So the adult cares, and that team of students also cares for each other. Yes, that's hugely important. I've run out of time. I normally do these things in like days, not an hour. It's a large concept. Hopefully you got a little glimmer of what MTSS is. You all feel free to contact me with additional questions. I have something called a multi-tiered systems of support handbook implementation.
Cyrus, can you do the video
Interested in
for
that?
the presentation?
Call or email me at the number here. It's a more Common Core support training for teachers.
All right.
Great. Let's go to slide.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the participants were engaged in a case study of a school in Central California. Were presented Jorge as a student attending that school. And a little bit as a fifth grader, was academically, he had not performed well last year on his SBAC, was pretty much D's, except for all D's, 1 F and 1 A, an A in computer class, was being bullied, is a father and an English learner. So that was the task for the group, was to help construct for the student in this particular school. So the quotes posed to me were really around, goodness, what's really happening? No one seems to know Jorge, so we need to, think questions around what needs to happen at the school level, just in terms of structure and supports for the adults before we can even tackle the MTSS. So remember, there's some building blocks that need to implement MTSS. And again, we will share these slides with you all. We will share the link to the video. And we will also share the case study of Jorge. Open it up now to questions. I think Cyrus is going to facilitate that process. So what lingering questions do you have for me? Is this a concept valuable to you? Missing pieces are still in understanding. So Cyrus, take it away with responding to or posing them to me.
All right. Yes. If anyone has, whoops, I'm going to stop presenting here and I'm going to just share a picture for you so you're not just staring at nothing. I don't see any questions in the Q&A area. So Carla, I suppose what I would like to ask around this is, because the hardest part of this process to me seems that early identification part. How do you determine in 15 days, in 5 days, that there's a problem? I know that there is if you are using a dashboard, you're able to see patterns more clearly. but how exactly are you looking for these patterns?
Yeah, to that idea that I mentioned when you're building the foundation. So as either a district or as a school site, you know what those early warning indicators are going to be. And I would suggest for you all who are participating that at the early warning indicators that were determined by the American Institutes for Research, by the U.S. Department of Ed, to come up with an actual early warning. There are actual indicators, indices, that let you know if a child is displaying non-attendance in the first 10 days of school. That's an early, particular issues probably later on down the line. There are just early warning indicators around being a foster youth, around being already identified as special ed, being someone who is low income. So building those indicators into your system so that when a child comes before the school year even starts, you have a roster of who your students are, you start to be active rather than reactive. Again, it's responding early and often. So through your list of students and talking about who is Jorge, let's go back to Jorge. So he warning indicators, he is a foster youth, a low-income student. His history from last year shows high non-attendance. He's displaying those things. What reports does our school have already that could address some of those needs? And you start to provide those to him once and see if there are changes in the child's attendance behavior and or academic to help kind of course correct before it's too late. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought the example was pretty interesting, especially, Jorge reminded me a little bit of myself as a kid where, I had some very good grades and some not good grades. And finding the ways to capitalize on where the child excels is really fascinating to me. The fact that he did so well in computers, which is, it is a math-based subject, and yet he does not do well in math. It seems to me that there is a pattern there that you can use one skill to uplift another.
Yeah, and I think the real point of MTSS is getting to root causes. So many times, again, we look at very limited data on kids, and it's traditionally summative academic data, behavioral data, and make decisions rightly or wrongly. And that's saying open up broader base so that you have a holistic view of the child. Spend some time trying multiple interventions, conversations with the adults in that child's life, whether it's the foster parent, teachers who engage with that child, so we can come to the real root cause. And again, not make decisions like, well, he's missed, again, this came up during the presentation. People were saying, he'd missed 50 days last year, half this year, and he was suspended. And they're like, well, why would you do that? I go, are you kidding me? That's typically what happens, at least at the schools I've worked in, but maybe that's only in Chicago. And we're thinking, well, that's not the root cause. It's not just, that's not going to solve it, and it's not going to help him come to school anymore. So again, drilling down to root causes, but you can't do that if you have very limited data and data that you get too late. So any other questions?
I don't think so. I think we can wrap up. I do want to apologize for the technical issues that we've had today. This video will be going live on our YouTube page shortly, and I'll cut out some of those bad areas so that you can see exactly what you need to see, and the slides will be up as well.
Great. So Cyrus, if you can go to the Pivot Contact Us page. And I will just close out by saying thank you all for participating in the multi-tiered systems of support webinar and kind of part 2 today. You will again receive the PowerPoint presentation, the link to the presentation video, And don't hesitate to, you'll see on this last slide, that's my direct office line. There's our website, and shoot us any questions, or if you would like additional resources on MTSS, we would love to work with you. So again, thank you very much, and take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Pivot, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Happy March. Bye, everyone.